Hello, I'm John Kelly, and this is the Weber Auto YouTube channel. In this episode, we are going to look at the history of Toyota automatic transmission fluids. In 1995, I was invited by Toyota to visit Japan and different Toyota historical sites in Japan. And one of the most amazing places that I was able to visit was the Toyota Commemorative Museum of Industry and Technology in Nagoya, Japan. And this museum was housed in the first assembly plant for Toyota vehicles. It was a great big building, and it was clear full of historical artifacts related to, of course, Toyota Motor Corporation history. But one of the most interesting parts of that to me was a section on the history of Toyota automatic transmissions. And if you're ever in Japan, down by Nagoya, I would highly recommend that you visit there. And Nagoya is not too far from Toyota City, where the Toyota Motor Corporation World Headquarters is located, and several assembly plants are in that area. So, in that museum, I was able to see Toyota's very first automatic transmission. Actually, it was a semi-automatic transmission developed for the 1959 model year, and this was called the Toyoglide, and it was a two-speed transmission. And when I say semi-automatic, I mean it did not automatically shift from first gear to second gear. You had to move the gear selector to go from first to second, but there was no clutch pedal involved. It used a fluid coupling. And the name Toyoglide, if you've seen my video on the 80-year history of General Motors automatic transmission fluids, you know that there were several versions of the General Motors Powerglide transmission. And this original 1959 Toyota Toyoglide transmission has an awful lot of similarities with the General Motors Powerglide. If you look at this photo here, you can see these on the side view here, you can see a couple of little bumps on the Toyoglide, and then look at this photo here from the cast iron GM Powerglide from 1958 here in our shop, and you can see a lot of similarities. The planetary gear sets inside look almost identical. The transmission case isn't the same length, and obviously there'll be a little bit of differences, but it was obviously patterned after, if not just blatantly copied, from the General Motors Powerglide transmission. So the first Toyoglide from 1959 was called the A10. In 1962, for the 1963, they made some updates and made that Toyoglide automatically shift from first to second gear. They called it the A20 transmission, and it was first used in the Toyota Corolla. Now, I found a brochure for the original 1963 Toyota Corolla, and it has the optional two-speed Toyoglide transmission listed in it. It says, and would you believe automatic transmission? Here's the first import of its class to offer an optional two-speed torque converter automatic transmission. What a thrill to unlock the torque of a Corolla, feel its surge of power and pickup, and enjoy it automatically. Women especially will enjoy the driving ease and freedom it affords. She likes it automatically, just a fingertip touch, and then the Corolla shifts for itself. It handles with silken smoothness ladies love. And of course, they're not alone. Men find that the Corolla with automatic has all the getaway and go they like, plus effortless handling in traffic, crosstown or cross-country. It's simply the easiest import in the world to drive. So, women especially would like this. So, it's got some great photos, as you can see here, of the dash with the gear selector for the two-speed Toyoglide. And it tells us in the specifications section here on the back that it comes with a standard 3-speed manual transmission, but an optional 2-speed automatic coupled to a torque converter. That was Toyota's very first automatically shifting transmission, the 2-speed Toyoglide. I have a service manual for a 1967 Toyota Corolla with this Toyoglide transmission in it. And if I open up and look at the recommended fluid for this transmission, it shows that the fluid required for this transmission is the Type A Suffix A fluid that General Motors developed. So Toyota, like all other automobile manufacturers with their own automatic transmissions, used General Motors transmission fluid specifications until they developed their own. Now Ford broke away from General Motors specs in 1959, Chrysler broke away in 1968, and Toyota did not break away until 1988. So the Type A Suffix A is a General Motors fluid specification. And I have a can of the Type A Suffix A fluid right here. It is made by Mobil. It's called the Mobilfluid, automatic transmission fluid. And it tells us right on the top here, this is Mobilfluid 200. And it gives us it tells us it's Type A Suffix A, and it gives us an armor qualification number of ATF 752A. And for those of you who aren't familiar with armor qualification numbers, that's the company that General Motors hired to test fluids submitted by companies like Mobil to make sure that they pass General Motors fluid specifications. So right here in the book, it lists 4 different recommended brands of the Type A Suffix A fluid. It calls for Caltex Texamatic fluid. So Caltex was the California version of Texaco back in the early 60s. It calls for SO Standard automatic transmission fluid, the Type A Suffix A. It calls for British Petroleum Type A Suffix A. It calls for that exact can that I just showed you of Mobilfluid 200, which is what that one was. It also called for the Shell Donix T6 Type A Suffix A fluid. So it lists, looks like 5 different possible fluids that were approved by Toyota for use in their very first 2-speed automatic Toyoglide transmission. Okay, in 1966, for the 1967 model year, Toyota released a brand new transmission called the A30, and this is the 3-speed Toyoglide transmission, a fully automatic transmission, 3-speed. And in the service manual, repair manual that I have here for that transmission, if I open it up to the recommended fluids, it lists 6 different fluids. So the recommended fluids out of this manual here call for the Caltex Texaco Type F fluid, Castrol, British Petroleum, Esso, Mobil, or Shell Type F fluids. And Ford licensed their Type F fluid specification the same way that General Motors did, except Ford had a different licensing number scheme that started with a 2P for the license numbers rather than the AQ that General Motors used. So the very first Toyoglide, 3-speed Toyoglide, that came in the 1967 Toyota Crown and Corolla Mark II used Ford ATF Type F. So we started out with General Motors Type A Suffix A, then we went to a Ford fluid next. An interesting side note out of this Toyoglide repair manual is it calls for a special service tool kit right here for the Toyoglide. And Weber State University has had a partnership with Toyota for many, many years and have a technical training center here for their dealerships. And one of the leftover tool sets from the training programs that we've run here over the years is the old Toyota Toyoglide tool set right here. And I find that's amazing that we still have this Toyoglide tool set. As you can see here in these photos, It's almost complete. There's just one little ring that's missing in the lid here. Unfortunately, I don't have a Toyoglide transmission to work on. I've looked on eBay. I've searched everywhere I can find for an old Toyoglide automatic transmission, but those have got to be pretty rare because Toyota didn't produce that many vehicles back then with an automatic transmission. It was optional. I would like to get my hands on an old 2-speed or a 3-speed Toyoglide. If any of you know where one is, make a note in the comments below and let me know. I'd sure like to get my hands on one. Okay, the next fluid specification that Toyota adopted was in 1968. Toyota adopted the General Motors Dexron automatic transmission fluid specification. Now, the Dexron spec had been just released in 1967, and this fluid supersedes the previous Type A Suffix A fluid that was used in the early 2-speed Toyoglide transmission. But it does not supersede the Type F fluid that was used in the 3-speed Toyoglide transmission. So as you can see, Toyota was doing some experimenting with fluids and transmission designs, and as a matter of fact, in 1970, they developed what I believe is the world's first electronically controlled transmission. So in the Toyota Historical Museum I told you about in Nagoya, Japan, they list an A32 electronically controlled automatic transmission. It's abbreviated the EAT. And I forget the actual model that it went in as an optional transmission, but this transmission actually had shift solenoids in 1970. Now, to my knowledge, nobody else was playing around with shift solenoids until the early 80s. And so this was an incredible thing. Now, Toyota transmissions are made by a company called Aisin, and Toyota owns, totally owns Aisin or is the majority shareholder, but the Aisin transmissions, if you get a Toyota vehicle, you've got an Aisin transmission, most likely. That is not 100% true for every possible vehicle ever made, but most of the time it will be an Aisin transmission. So in 1972, Toyota partnered with Borg-Warner Corporation to develop some automatic transmissions, and they called that the Aisin-Warner Corporation. And as you can see here in some of these photographs, there's the letter AW on this early automatic transmission I have here in the shop. And then I have a fairly new, a 2015 8-speed automatic transmission here that has the letters AW on there. Apparently Aisin kept the AW symbol, but later on, eventually, and I forget exactly what year, they dropped the partnership with Borg-Warner, but kept the AW, probably for recognition's sake, but I don't know. So anyway, Toyota adopts the Dexron automatic transmission fluid. Now this is the Dexron-B fluid, as I refer to it, because all the license numbers of the original Dexron start with the letter B, and this has a license number of B10001. So Dexron was the automatic transmission fluid used after 1969-1970 in Toyota automatic transmissions. Now, there was a change in automatic transmission fluids in 1973. Automatic transmission fluids up to that point had been using sperm whale oil as a corrosion inhibitor, a rust preventer, and they had to quit using that by the 1974 model year. And so there was a revised Dexron, and it was called the Dexron-II fluid because the license number started with the letter C, and Toyota, of course, adopted that. And then in 1975, they made a change to that fluid specification and called it the Dexron-II fluid. And Toyota and Aisin produced many automatic transmissions, too many to list. And all of those, with the exception of the one that used the Ford Type F fluid, used GM Dexron automatic transmission fluid versions. And they continued using that all the way up through Dexron-III automatic transmission fluids. Now, in 1988, Toyota finally developed their own automatic transmission fluid specification for a certain transmission, but not all transmissions. And this transmission model was the A241H. Now, if you're familiar with Toyota automatic transmissions, if the model number ends with the E, then it's either rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive only. If it ends with the letter F, then it's a four-wheel drive vehicle. If it ends with the letter H, then it's an all-wheel drive vehicle. So this A241H transaxle in the 1988 Corolla, it was an optional transaxle. It was an all-wheel drive system. This was their first all-wheel drive system developed, and that transmission required a special fluid called the Type T fluid. There's a service bulletin right here from April 1st of 1988 announcing the Toyota Type T automatic transmission fluid for the A241H transmission. So I have a can of Type T fluid, as you can see here, Toyota ATF Type T. And it's an interesting can. It's been sitting on our shelves here since 1993. When we ordered it, let's see, we ordered it in August of 1993 from Larry H. Miller Toyota in Murray, Utah, not too far from here. And that was, I believe, his first dealership. And that group has grown into a giant automotive powerhouse as far as car sales. And this type fluid came in this can. It says it's 4 liters of fluid. Interesting thing on the top here, it has a little peel tab that you peel off. I want to be real careful with it. Little plastic peel tab. And then it has a funnel right there. And then you pop this lid off of here and use that little funnel to pour the fluid into another funnel to get it into your transaxle. So this was the Toyota Type T fluid for 1988 for the all-wheel drive Corolla. And that was Toyota's very first automatic transmission fluid specification. Now, other vehicles that did not use the Type T fluid specification continued to use Dexron fluid specifications. So here is we just bought this a couple months ago, Toyota automatic transmission fluid, it says here on the front. And on the back label here, it tells us that it's formulated to replace Dexron-II or Dexron-III in applicable Toyota models. Please consult your owner's manual to ensure correct application. So Toyota is selling fluid today that met the previous Dexron-3H automatic transmission fluid specification. Now, that specification had been discontinued by General Motors in 2011 because they wanted everyone to quit using Dexron-3H and move to the better quality Dexron-6 automatic transmission fluid. But Toyota still offers fluid that meets that specification, although it's not licensed because you can't license Dexron-III fluid anymore. General Motors won't do it. So here's Toyota Dexron-III and II equivalent fluid. Now, the next Toyota fluid specification change came in 1993, and I have a technical service bulletin here from 1993. It tells us that the transmission model A340EI that came in the Turbo Supra for 1993 was designed to use a new fluid called the Type T2 fluid. Type T2. So we had the Type T back here. They didn't call it the Type T1, but apparently it was, because now there's a Type T2 fluid that's available. And it shows us here right on this bulletin that the dipstick handle it has printed on it Type T2 fluid. It shows us that the drain plug has a T and then a 2 in Roman numerals after it, reminding people that the Toyota Turbo Supra from 1993 takes this special fluid in this new 4-speed transmission. It also tells us that the non-Turbo Supra continued using Dexron-II automatic transmission fluid. So that's the Type T2 fluid from 1993. Then in 1995, another fluid specification change occurred. I have an SAE document here from the Society of Automotive Engineers. It's document number 952348, and the name of it is Development of Automatic Transmission Fluid for Slip-Controlled Lockup Clutch Systems. And what that means is that the torque converter clutch will now be allowed to slip. So starting in the mid-90s, there was a phase in to the onboard diagnostics Generation 2 requirements by the EPA, and by 1996, all vehicles sold in the United States had to meet the OBD2 specifications. So to avoid possible false misfire trouble codes, the P300 for a general misfire, and then P301 through 3 whatever for the number of cylinders you have, manufacturers came up with a way to partially disconnect the engine from the transmission by not having the torque converter clutch fully lock up and engage, which means the engine crankshaft would be solidly connected to the transmission input shaft. On a controlled slip torque converter clutch, that solid engagement isn't there. There's a slight amount of slip allowed to take place that helps prevent these false trouble codes for misfires. So they needed a new fluid that would prevent what was called a shudder. So a shudder was, as the torque converter clutch was slipping very slowly, it would slip and then grip, slip and grip, slip, grip. It would cause a vibration as you drive. And so Toyota, like other automobile manufacturers, had to develop a new transmission fluid to try to address that shuddering. And I've joked in the other videos that we had shuddering in the mid-90s. We had shuddering in the early 80s as the original lockup torque converter clutches engaged and released, and we still have shudder issues today. But Toyota developed a new fluid called the Type T3 fluid. Now, in all my research, I have not found any place where it calls for the T3 fluid in any Toyota Technical Service Bulletin or repair information. But yet, in this document, it describes the T3 fluid, and there's also in the T4 fluid document, it refers to this earlier document, and it calls it the T3 fluid. So it's a little bit of a mystery. I don't know that it ever actually made it into a vehicle or not, but I know that it was designed to. I don't know if it finally made it, though. Right. And then in 1998, Toyota announced the T4 fluid specification. So I have an SAE document here, document number 97 for 1997, 2927, and the name of this is Next Generation High-Performance ATF for Slip-Controlled Automatic Transmission. And apparently the Type 3 fluid didn't work out too well, and they needed to upgrade the fluid, make it a little better, and they released the Type T4 fluid. So here's a bottle of ATF Type T4 fluid from Toyota, and this fluid supersedes and replaces all previous Type T anything fluid. So the Type T1, 2, and 3 fluids were replaced by this. But this fluid did not replace the Dexron fluid. Those two fluids are not compatible, should never be mixed. There's a service bulletin released by Toyota and Lexus telling you do not mix those up, and it shows you a little chart of which fluids are compatible with each other. And they've updated that chart over the years as each Type T fluid has come out. But the Type T4 fluid seemed to be a much better fluid than anything in the past. And as a matter of fact, in this SAE document on the Type T4 fluid, according to their testing there in that document, it was a better fluid than the Dexron-3H fluid. So this fluid eventually replaced the Dexron fluid and phased it out totally. Now, that didn't mean that you put this in vehicles that had Dexron, because this was a different fluid than Dexron. It just meant that future transmissions were designed for the Type T4 fluid rather than the Dexron fluid specifications from General Motors. So Type T4 fluid came out in 1998. Now, Toyota publishes lists, and there's all kinds of charts of all the different transmissions that they've released. There are hundreds of transmissions. The Aisin transmission company has produced a lot of automatic transmissions, and they're used by almost every other vehicle manufacturer in the world in certain vehicles. If you get a Ram pickup truck with a Cummins engine, you get an Aisin transmission. It's used in some General Motors vehicles. I've seen it in Cadillacs. I've seen it in Volvos. I've seen it in a number of other vehicle manufacturers' vehicles. Aisin is a supplier of automatic transmissions to anyone that wants to buy one. All right, the next fluid to come along came out in 2002, and this is called the World Standard, or WS fluid, from Toyota. This bottle actually has a 2002 label on it, so this is an early bottle that I purchased. Well, let's see, this is 2019, so that would have been 17 or so years ago that I purchased this. There's a service bulletin from Toyota talking about the release of the 2002 World Standard fluid, and it tells us that the WS fluid is not compatible with the T4 fluid, and that almost every Toyota vehicle with Aisin transmissions built after the 2004 model year would use the WS fluid. So they were phasing out the Type T4 fluid, but obviously it's still available to purchase for those earlier than 2004 vehicles. But this fluid specification has stood and is still used today in the 2019 vehicles. Now, when this fluid came out in 2002, we still had 4-speed transmissions. We had some 5-speeds. 6-speed transmissions didn't come along until 2007 or 2006 for the 2007 model year. We had 8-speed transmission come out in 2007. Aisin developed the first 8-speed transmission for light-duty vehicles in the world. It's the one right behind me here, the Toyota AA80E, and that came in some Lexus vehicles for the 2008 model year. So an 8-speed automatic transmission. Right here to my side, I have a 2015 AE80F. So that was AA, and this is AE, so several generations later of the same 8-speed automatic transmission. And you can still get that in Toyota pickup trucks today, the 8-speed automatic transmission. And those all take this WS fluid. Toyota and Aisin developed a 10-speed automatic transmission, model number AG-A0E. AG-A0E. And it uses the WS fluid. So this Toyota WS fluid is kind of a mystery to me because it came out in 2002, the fluid specification, and there were 3 SAE documents in a row in 2003 talking about the development of this fluid. Here's one right here, the development of a new automatic transmission fluid for fuel economy from Toyota, and then a couple of companies that they worked with developing that produced documents of their own talking about this new design of transmission fluid. And it says right in one of these documents that they were trying to decide, do they use a Group 3 base oil or a Group 4 base oil. I'm pretty sure from the price that it's not a Group 4. It's not a fully synthetic base oil. So it's probably a Group 3, similar to the Chrysler ATF plus 4 fluid is a Group 3 fluid. But it doesn't say anywhere in here, and I've searched all over the internet, I can't find it. And Toyota does not license their fluids to be sold under other names. And so if you want Toyota WS fluid, you can order it on Amazon and you can order it on eBay and you can get it from Toyota dealerships, but you're not going to find WS fluid under the name of Mobil or any other brand of automatic transmission fluid. It's only going to be Toyota fluid. Now, there's a lot of other fluids out there that claim to be WS compatible, but you need to pay attention and read the labels on those, because a lot of those say it's also Type T4 compatible. Well, Toyota themselves tells us that WS and Type T4 are not cross-compatible with each other, so that can't be. Aisin, actually, the manufacturer of the transmission, sells Type T4 and WS fluids themselves, and I would believe that that is the correct fluid as well, since they're the manufacturer of the transmission. And it meets a Toyota fluid specification of JWS 3324 or NWS 9638. So anyway, to have developed a fluid in 2002 and had it never change in 17 years, I have a hard time believing that. In all of my research looking at other transmission fluid histories, I know that other transmission fluids have revisions. They still call it the same name, but they revise the fluid. And since Toyota's being real private about this, the fluid specs on the WS fluid, I'm almost positive that they've done some revisions to the WS fluid specification, and that a bottle of 2002 WS fluid is not the same fluid as a bottle of 2019 WS fluid. I think they've just kept the same name with it. There's been too many technological changes, too many changes in fuel economy regulations and other things that I'm very skeptical. I just don't believe it. All right, there are two other fluids that I don't have here, and they're for CVT, continuously variable transmissions, that Toyota and Scion have used. In 2012, for the Scion IQ, there was a K41B CVT that used a special fluid called the CVT fluid TC. And I've searched all over the internet. I cannot find that at all. I have not checked with a Toyota dealer, but I can't find the CVT fluid TC. Now there's in 2013 for the Toyota Corolla, there was a K313 CVT, and then there's a K41B in the Scion IQ starting in 2014 that calls for a new fluid, a CVT FE fluid. So the 2012 and 13 fluid was CVT fluid TC, but the CVT fluid for 2013 and above on everything except that initial Scion IQ calls for a CVT fluid FE. And I did find some of that for sale on eBay. And funny thing, if you look at the photograph of that I found on eBay, it comes in a can that looks just like this. It has the same top. It has the same funnel on the top of it here. It's about $80 for 4 liters of this CVT fluid. I guess at $20 a liter, that's probably a fully synthetic base oil plus the proper fluid additives type fluid. So just keep in mind that automatic transmission fluids are made from a base oil that's either synthetically produced or refined from crude oil. And there are several different base oil categories. You can look those up. But automatic transmission fluid, just like motor oil, is made from a base oil. And then automatic transmission fluids have dyes in them sometimes. They might be red, they might be green, might be kind of a yellow color. And then they also have what's called an additive package. And there are many different additive packages to accomplish different things depending on the type of transmission that you have. So a CVT transmission is going to require a lot different of an additive package than a regular planetary gear set style automatic transmission. So buyer beware. Look out for these universal fluids, these one fluid fits all, multi-vehicle, multi-transmission fluids. I was at Walmart last summer, and I took a few photographs of some of the aftermarket fluids that claimed they were compatible with Toyota vehicles. So if you look at this first one here, this photograph is of Castrol Transmax Import Multi-Vehicle Fluid. And right on the front of it, it says for Honda, Toyota, Nissan, and other imported vehicles. So that sounds great. But if you look here at the rear label and you read through all of their information about what fluids they assert or claim that it's compatible with, you'll find that there's only one fluid specification that's actually licensed, and that's the Ford Mercon 5 fluid, or V as I called it in the Ford transmission fluid history video. So really what you're buying here in this Castrol Transmax Import Multi-Vehicle Fluid for Honda, Toyota, and Nissan is a bottle of Mercon 5 Ford fluid, because that's the only fluid specification that it's made for. So unless you want to pour Ford Mercon 5 fluid in your vehicle, that's probably not a good idea. And they are recommending this fluid for use in vehicles that require, and you can see this big list here, but let's get down to the Toyota Lexus ones. Toyota and Lexus Type T, Type T3, Type T4, and then it shows many other Chrysler, General Motors, and Ford fluids. But as you can see there with the license number of M5120802, that is a Mercon 5 license number. So obviously Toyota hasn't recommended or used Mercon 5 fluid in any of their transmissions, and it's probably not a good idea to pour that in your Toyota or Lexus transmission. And even if you did buy this to put in your Toyota or Lexus, Castrol is only saying that it's recommended for the T1 through T4 fluids, which is a vehicle that's made before 2004. So on the front label here, it sounds like this wonderful fluid that you can pour in your brand new Toyota. But you got to read that back package label there and find that no, it's not, and educate yourself to find that it's just simply not compatible with newer Toyotas, and and as I said, it's just Mercon 5 fluid, and it is not compatible at all. Do not pour it in any vehicle that calls for the WS World Standard fluid. Right. Now, one other bottle, as you can see here, that I saw on the shelf at Walmart that claimed to be compatible with Toyotas is this Valvoline Max Life Full Synthetic, so it must be good, automatic transmission fluid, multi-vehicle. So it says right on the front label, this multi-vehicle formula is recommended for most GM, Ford, Toyota, and Honda models. But on the rear label, if you scan through there, it lists over 24 different fluid specifications that this magical fluid is supposed to be compatible with, including the Type T, Type T2, Type T4, and the WS fluids. And you'll notice that there are absolutely zero license numbers on this fluid. So it's not even like the Castrol. At least the Castrol was a licensed Mercon 5. This isn't licensed anything. This is just Valvoline saying, hey, we made this fluid and it's fully synthetic, as if that's some magical thing and that should work in any vehicle that you want to throw it in. And that's just plain ridiculous. I wouldn't recommend this fluid for any vehicle. It's not licensed at all. And if you've watched any of my other 4 videos on automatic transmission fluid history, you know that I only recommend using the original factory recommended fluids. Don't use any aftermarket fluids. If you want your vehicle to to work and act like it did when it was new, you need to have the same parts on it and the same fluids in it. And automatic transmission fluids do make a difference. And if you've changed your transmission fluid and now your transmission's acting differently than it used to, and you didn't put the factory recommended fluid back in it, licensed factory fluid back in it, then I would recommend that you flush that stuff out of there and get some good factory fluid in it. All right, we've covered a lot here with the 60-year history of the Toyota automatic transmission fluids. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a good day.